Gulliver's Travels by Johnathan Swift. Chapter 1. Shipwrecked at Lilliput. My father had a small estate in Nottinghamshire. I was the third of 5 sons. When I was 14 years old, my father sent me to college. But as it was expensive, I left after staying there for 3 years. I was then apprenticed to Mr. James Bates, a well known surgeon of London. Now, the meaning of apprenticed means to work under someone as a trainee. I worked under this surgeon for 4 years. During this period, my father would send me some money, which I used to study navigation, because I always felt that I would one day travel to faraway lands. When I left Mr. Bates, my father sent me to medical college at Leiden in Holland. After nearly 3 years there, Mr. Bates very kindly got me the position of a doctor on the ship the Swallow. I stayed with the Swallow for 3.5 years, after which I thought I would settle down in London. My master, Mr. Bates, used to send me some of his patients, and I bought a small house. After a while, I married Mary Barton. When my master died 2 years later, I found myself in great financial difficulties. The number of patients coming to see me slowly became less and less. And so, after talking it over with my wife and friends, I decided to go to sea again. In the next 6 years, I was a surgeon in 2 ships and travelled to the East and West Indies. In my spare time, I would read books written by the best authors, and when I was ashore in foreign lands, I would pass my time studying the strange people and their languages and customs. As I was lucky enough to have a good memory, I could learn languages very fast. I also earned a good bit of money in these voyages, and as the last of the voyages was not very interesting, I decided to return home to my family. Now, the meaning of voyage means a long journey involving travel by sea. I shifted my house close to the docks in the hope that I would get patients among the sailors. But in the 3 years we lived there, I did not do too well. And so I accepted a good offer from Captain William Pritchard, master of the Antelope, who was making a voyage to the South Sea. We set sail from Bristol on May 4th, 1699. After a good start, we were driven northwest of Tasmania by a very rough and violent storm. 12 of our crew members died in the storm, and the rest of us were left very weak. On the 5th of November, we spotted a large rock, but the wind was so strong that we were dashed against it. The ship was split into two, and we all swam to save our lives. I do not know what happened to my companions, but my guess is that they were all lost at sea. I swam as much as I could till my feet suddenly touched the bottom. After a long walk of over a mile, I got to the shore at about 8 o'clock in the evening. I hunted around for people but could find no one. Then, as I was very tired, I lay down on the ground and slept for about 9 hours. When I awoke and tried to stand up, I could not move. I found that I was lying on my back with my arms and legs tied tightly to the ground with thin, fine ropes. I felt these ropes all over my body, from my armpits to my thighs. I could hear some noise around me, but as I was lying down, I could not move my head to see what it was. Suddenly, I felt something moving up my leg, to my chest, and almost up to my chin. When I looked to see what it was, you cannot imagine my surprise when I found it to be a human being not more than 6 inches high. He held a bow and arrow in his hands. In a few seconds, about 40 of these creatures had collected on my chest behind the first. I was so astonished to see these beings that I let out a loud roar, at which they all ran off, some jumping off my chest onto the ground. Now, the meaning of the word astonished means to be surprised. They soon came back, and one of them lifted his hands and eyes as if in admiration and said in a shrill and clear voice, Hekina Degul. Now, the meaning of shrill is very high and loud. They all repeated these words, and as I couldn't understand them, I said nothing. By this time, I was feeling most uncomfortable, and I started breaking the ropes that bound me. At once, I heard a command and felt 100 arrows pierce my left hand. They felt like pin pricks. I was attacked by these arrows all over my body. I was not hurt, as I was able to shield my face with my hand and my leather jacket protected my body. I knew I could defeat them even if they had a large army, because I was so much bigger than them. But I decided to lie still and see what they would do. At once, the arrows stopped coming. After a while, they built a sort of stage which reached my face. One of them climbed it and made a speech. He spoke a language I could not understand, even though I knew quite a few languages. He seemed an important person and seemed to be sometimes threatening and at others giving me promises and pity. I decided to be politer and spoke at first in English, but later switched over to a sign language. I was very hungry by then and put my fingers to my mouth to show that I wanted food. The Hergo, or Great Lord, as I later discovered he was, understood me and shouted a command. Immediately, many people climbed up ladders onto my chest with baskets of food. There was a lot of food, but to me, it seemed only a mouthful. There was bread as small as a bullet, and legs of mutton as small as a sparrow's wing. The little men were surprised to see me eat so much, and they all cheered when I finished eating. I was very tempted to pick up about 30 or 40 of them and dash them to the ground, but I did not. Besides, I now felt that as I was in their country, I must obey them and follow their rules. After my meal, I was visited by someone from the royal palace. This person spoke to me without any anger and kept pointing towards one direction, which I later discovered was the emperor's palace. I made him understand that I would not hurt them and asked him to free me. But this he would not do and shook his head and said, I would be a prisoner till the emperor saw me. Anyway, I was thankful that I was alive and these people had not put poison in my food. So I did not insist. I found that I was very tired and soon went to sleep. Later, I realized that they had drugged me through the food to be able to transport me to the palace. These people were very good mathematicians and craftsmen and had come up with a unique idea on how to take me to the palace. It seems the emperor had machines fixed to wheels to enable them to transport their largest ships to the sea. One such machine was used to carry me to the palace. While I was asleep, they put me on the machine with the help of pulleys, a very difficult job. But these little people did it. This job took 4 hours. On our way to the palace, we had to stop for the night. 500 guards watched over me, ready with bows and arrows in case I tried to escape. The next day we arrived near the palace gates. The emperor and his courtiers came out to greet me. At the place where we stopped, there stood an ancient temple, and this was the place where they decided I would live. It was not in use and was ideal for me. The great gate of the temple was 4 feet high and 2 feet wide, and I could very easily crawl through this gate. There were 2 windows in the gate, and through one of them 91 chains had been passed, which were bound to my foot by 36 locks. When they found that I could not escape, they cut the ropes that I was tied with, and I stood up. I cannot explain how astonished the huge crowd was that had gathered to see me when I stood up. The curious townspeople had come out onto the streets, and there were not less than 10,000 who climbed up my body with the help of ladders. This was later banned by the emperor. The chains that held me were 2 yards long, and I could walk comfortably in a semicircle. Soon I crept into the temple and lay down full length. My dear children, this is the end of chapter 1. We will continue with chapter 2 in our next video.